Thanks for having me, Mike Berman. I'm from AWS, um, located here in the Bay Area. So my career has been in education and workforce development as well. I started off as a middle school teacher in East Palo Alto at a small K-8 school. And our families asked us to start a high school, and so we went and did that. And that was adventurous. It was really interesting. We're super proud of what we were able to accomplish. But I learned a lot, and I wish I could go back and sort of talk to myself at that point and really focus on working backwards from career pathways and family sustaining incomes. Because I think we had this notion that we adopted a very like 4-year college or bust mentality. And I think part of that was because we really wanted to make sure that our students in our community felt that they had full access and were fully prepared for that trajectory. And I'm super proud of 100% 4-year college admission. And at the same time, I think we had a lot to learn about working backwards from those different career pathways and really understanding how there's multiple different pathways. It's not a linear progression. It might be that we're going to earn and learn at the same time and then move throughout our different careers. And so that's kind of what I've done. After leaving the school, I moved in the private sector, still related to education stuff, doing a lot of professional development for teachers and leaders of educational systems, primarily at the K-12 level. And then I came to Amazon about 7.5 years ago. And I've worked on a few different teams. First one was like a content team for an ed tech. That was a product that Amazon had. And then I moved over to AWS about 5.5 years ago. And what I do is kind of what Ray does, like what he articulated is like working with community colleges, with K-12 systems, with 4-year universities, and all polytechnics globally outside of the US, trying to help them understand the nature of industry demand, both at AWS, but also our network of customers and partners and vendors. And trying to have that alignment between what we call the supply side, like schools and training organizations, and the demand side. Amazon and all the other people out there running cloud or building the actual infrastructure of an information economy. And so that's what we're going to focus on this evening, is that like last part where I've landed and where we've done a bunch of work to really think about demystifying those jobs, really understanding what those opportunities are, and then hopefully illuminating some pathways, maybe getting you thinking about what those could be, and trying to like hopefully leave a trail of breadcrumbs in some way so that you can think about how to move along those pathways. So really excited to be here, really grateful for the time, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for coming. I know it's an evening, and I know it was a long day because I remember when it started on a call. So let me. I'm going to set the table a little bit, Mike. And I know you've got a presentation teed up. What I thought I would do very briefly, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoints, so I'm going to share an Excel spreadsheet because I know everybody loves an Excel spreadsheet. And what this is the demand for various job positions. You can see the title over here and the education level. The interesting part here is the 2026. Those are job openings that will be appearing in the next, actually 5 years beginning 2021. So this is a couple of years back, but it's still pretty solid. And these are the jobs that are related to the infrastructure side of the internet. So it's network stuff, it's user support, network architecture, but you know what? It's paving service, it's construction, because they're building data centers at a stunning rate. And there are huge construction projects all over the country. And the construction is, it's definitely commercial construction, but it's kind of special. A data center turns out to be kind of a special thing to build and to connect and to maintain and to power. So, and Mike will talk more about that. So you've got these construction trades, you've got computer automated teller and office machine reps, great candidates for working in a data center. Heating, air conditioning. Anyone know what the two things a data center needs are? What are the two things you think, what are the two most important things in a data center? Yeah, Wallace.
Servers and an internet connection.
What do servers need in order to run?
Power.
And what do they make when they're running?
Heat.
Bingo. So what are the two most important things in a data center?
Cooling and heat, electrical.
Bingo. Spot on. That's what runs data centers. And the amount of those two things is just staggering in a data center. The amount of cooling and the amount of electricity. Data centers are now the largest single consumer of electricity on the planet. So it's a big deal. And there's a huge need for people to work in this industry. And that's what we're here to talk about. Let me get over here to the numbers. Let's see, there's 5 million jobs in the next 5 years in the United States. In California, which is maybe more relevant, 461,000 jobs in California, and in the Bay Area, 114,000 openings. Those are openings. The number of jobs is over here, so 250,000 jobs, but 104. Look at how many openings there are going to be to reach that. So this is a big deal, and the people who work in this industry need people to work, and they need people who know more than just one piece of something. Really, it really is useful to know how the pieces fit together, and the relationships between all of these functions. And so that's what we've been focused on. Is we've been working with colleges, actually all over the country, but I think wasn't Gavilan one of the first things we did, Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, so Gavilan, San Jose City College, Chabot, we've been working with the colleges to update their programs. In some cases, maybe even add a new class if it's needed, but mostly it's updating existing instructional programs to prepare students to go make this really good earning that you can make in all of these jobs. And I think on that note, maybe Mike, can I turn it over to you? And
why don't you flip it over to me and we can dig into this a little bit, and I can sort of I can pick up on that and kind of frame the discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, not trying to over present. I'll pretend I'm not giving a presentation by not going into presentation mode. So there you go. Can everybody see what I got here? All right. So, I mean, the first thing is like, why does Amazon care about this and workforce development, right? And so Amazon is lots of different things. There's all these different businesses and all different kinds of enterprises. These are like four sort of, buckets, right? You have like the entire fulfillment network and the our stores and the packages that show up at your door the next day or 2 days. There's Prime Video and like Thursday Night Football, which I guess we're missing. And there's all different kinds of products and services. And then there's AWS, the cloud provider. And so all of that is running on AWS, by the way. We'll talk about that in a second. But what I really want to, what I really want to drive home is that Amazon has a huge need for talent. And also all of our customers and partners do too, and the vendors that we work with and the contractors that we work with. So it's a business imperative for us to be having this conversation, right? This isn't like a philanthropy. This isn't like hopefully I'm a nice guy and I have some goodness in my heart, but like, this is not like my job is to really think about talent strategy and expanding and diversifying pipelines of talent into these jobs. And so that's Amazon's stake in this, is that like, if our business is going to grow, it is one of the key inputs to that is skilled talent and a skilled workforce. So let's talk though about the right-hand side, AWS, right? So what is cloud? I'm not going to talk about what cloud computing is, but it's like basically it's cheaper and more scalable and more secure to run all of your workloads. Like before some of you joined, we were talking about like Ray's inventing the computer when he was getting, no, just kidding. Like just some of the old computer technology and like the mainframes that used to, take up an entire building. And now we're talking about data centers that is like warehouses filled with computers that are incredibly powerful. And it's much more scalable, faster, cost-effective, secure, technologically innovative to run your workload in a cloud offering in the public cloud. And that's why so many people are doing that. So this call right here is running through an AWS data center. Netflix runs on AWS, Thursday Night Football, Hulu, all these different, and not just media companies, but like, fintech, biotech, A to Z are running their workloads in the cloud. And then we talk about all this AI and ML technology that's on the horizon, which is super exciting. That all has to that's running on compute power. And as the demand for those services grows, so does the demand for talent. So let's talk about the two buckets that demand fits into. We can talk about jobs related to like the virtual cloud, where you can do them with your fingers behind a keyboard. And then there's the physical layer of the tech stack. And we're going to be focusing most of our conversation this evening on the right-hand side, but I think it's worthwhile just to touch on these two and make sure that we're thinking about how they're related to each other. So I think a lot of the conversation, I think it's fair to say that like there's been a lot of conversation about STEM education and technology careers. And I think most folks think about the left-hand side of the picture when they hear STEM workforce or technology opportunities. And there are a ton of amazing career pathways on that left-hand side, right? Like, from architecture to software development to machine learning and data science and everything in between. And that's all super exciting. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to work on some of those programs on the left-hand side. One of the things is I met Ray through that work. And I really do think that there's a rich set of opportunities over there. What most folks don't know as much about, and what we want to spend some time demystifying tonight, is the right-hand side. And I also want to submit to all of you that like the right-hand side is included in the STEM workforce. Like that we should expand the aperture when we think about technology jobs. Okay, so I'm going to try to look at the chat, but like Sarah or Ray just like bug me if
we'll keep an eye on it. I'm going to look for a link for that.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about these 4 functional areas related to cloud infrastructure. And this is like the physical layer of the technology stack. This is where this conversation needs to run through somewhere. Those ones and zeros are running through an AWS data center. And there's huge opportunity involved in building those data centers, connecting them with fiber, operating and maintaining them. And then we talked before, Wallace was talking about the power required to run those computers, to run that technology. And it's massive. It's on a massive scale. And one thing I want to emphasize, and I'll say it again, but let me just say this up top. 85% of these jobs related to cloud infrastructure or the infrastructure of an information economy, those are with our vendors and contractors. So we did a labor study. Like, we have a huge need for talent at AWS, but I really want, this is not about us. This is about like an entire, it's multiple sectors of the economy that have an enormous gap between the demand for skilled talent, those numbers that Ray was showing you, and the actual supply of talent, people moving into those jobs. And so my job, our collective job, what we work on together, me and Sarah and Ray and a bunch of other people, is to really try to address that gap. And the way we think about it is turning that demand into opportunity for learners and community members like you all. That's how we think about it. All right, so here are some of the jobs. This is just a small cross section of the jobs that are in demand, and those are some of the things that you find on Ray's spreadsheet, right? So that he just put into the chat, and I'm sure you can find as a part of the recording or the supporting materials for this presentation. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time digging into each of these functional areas, building the infrastructure of the internet, connecting it, operating, maintaining, and powering it. Okay, so let's talk about build. And again, oversimplification, but it's a good cross section for us to think about this, right? These data centers, they're massive edifices, and and when we build, at least at AWS, when we're building a campus, we're talking about putting 4, 6 of these big buildings on a site at once. And so the operation involved in standing up that edifice and doing all the connection is highly technical, and it requires a set of specialized training and experiences in order to make that happen, as well as tremendous coordination from the construction managers and the engineers that are sort of mapping out the plans to electricians. If you're looking for an in-demand career path that is going to add a ton of value and going to be in demand for a long time, go be an electrician. There's a huge gap of electricians, in not just related to data centers and information infrastructure, but just the entire economy really needs electricians. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the power section too. Controls technicians, laborers, there's plumbers, pipe fitters in the skilled trades, huge opportunity. And these are also highly technical jobs. You're using your hands, you're building things, you're turning a wrench, but you need to be able to have fluency with technology, because so much of the systems that are getting installed are smart systems that are connected into not just the power grid, but also to an IT grid and a network infrastructure. Let's talk about connect. A lot of folks don't realize that, we talk a lot about wireless, but all those wireless towers, 5G requires 8 times more fiber optic connectivity than 4G, right? So there's a physical layer of the technology stack that undergirds all of the technology that we think of as in the cloud or wireless. So huge opportunities to learn and to grow into careers related to fiber optic technology. So this is one of our fiber vendors. He's demonstrating this is a cable that has more than 3,000 strands of fiber, and that's not big compared to some of the other cables that they use. It's the width of a human hair, and then the skills required and the training required to splice those cables together. You can see this picture up on the top right. This is one of the fiber workshops that we've run with students learning how to do fusion splicing. And if you can imagine, a fiber optic cable is not as simple as, the connection is not just plugging them into each other. There's some specialized technology and training involved in making sure that you have no loss of signal as you fuse together this fiber optic strand.
Hey, Mike,
Go
let
ahead.
me butt in for a second, because that workshop. So Wallace, this is funny. That's a 2-day workshop. One of the guys that went to that 2-day workshop was just finishing up his associate's degree in computer science, thinking he was going to maybe transfer or something. And he did the 2-day workshop. At the end of the workshop, those guys right there hired him and sent him on the road to work on projects all over the Western United States and making huge money doing it. Because he had that was the one piece that he was missing. in his skills. Interesting.
Hang on.
Oh,
Here
you
he
got him?
There he is.
There
He's
he
on
is.
the right. That was him coming back. So this was like, so he got hired in June, and this is a picture of him in September. He came back to Mission College, but they sent him up to Oregon, and he was splicing fiber full time. So that's him on the right. And then his like supervisor, the guy who came to the workshop and hired him. So like, when we talk about that connection, like this is like these folks are so hungry for talent. And again, we're talking about our vendors and contractors. We're not, they don't work directly for AWS. And so they do splicing work for us, a ton of it, which is why we're invested in trying to build out their workforce. But then they also, you know, they wired SoFi Stadium, or like done a ton of work in Las Vegas. Like that's what this company does. And Team Fishel, who they got hired for, doesn't only do fiber work, they do a bunch of other construction work as well too. And again, these skills are highly transferable, and a lot of them run adjacent to each other, right? So if you're learning about horizontal directional drilling, you know, running cable under the ground, there's that's applicable to lots of other industries as well. Okay, so operate and maintain, like once the building gets run, Wallace talked about this before. He's our resident expert. It's not just the servers themselves, but you also need to run the physical plant. Okay, you'll take this next slide, Wallace. You got it? Cool. All right. All right. So like, we don't need to dig into this, like into the weeds too far, but hopefully this is a helpful frame for you all to think about. So, and forgive the AWS alphabet soup of acronyms, but like, just pay attention to the pictures and what we're talking about. So this is, figuratively speaking, upstairs is the data hall. That's where it's like a room the size of a football field, filled with computers, like filled with servers, like and like just as far as the eye can see. And those servers need to be maintained, right? Like some of their components will reach the end of life. They'll need to be, you know, swapped out, the motherboard, the power supply, whatever. And their life cycle involves putting them into racks and installing them, wiring them up, connecting them to the network. And then when they achieve end of life, you need to decommission them, right? You need to and dispose of those components safely and securely, and make sure that all the data is wiped off of all that stuff. All that, what I was just describing, we think of that as upstairs work. That's what we call data center operations. That's maintaining the hardware that's there. And that also involves some IT and networking work, the cabling, etc. That's all what we call upstairs. And we have a whole team, many teams related to what we call DCO. As Wallace, our resident data center expert, had mentioned, what these servers need is power and cooling, because they're throwing off a lot of heat. And so the people, quote unquote, downstairs maintain the physical plant, and that involves all the power distribution systems that are involved in ensuring that the servers upstairs have uninterrupted power. Because even if the power goes out from the utility, that's not going to satisfy our customers if we're like, sorry, we lost, you know, like we commit to them that their data will be secure and it will be accessible at all times. There's also a whole bunch of redundancy, et cetera, built into the system. But we have systems in place to make sure that there's power is uninterrupted. So you have folks that are managing and servicing our diesel generators, right? There are battery failover systems that these folks need to maintain. So there's a ton of skill needed in terms of electrical and mechanical systems that also overlap with a lot of those building trades that are there to install them. The HVAC systems, a lot of them use water cooling and evaporative cooling. That requires knowledge of water pumping and mechanical systems that are also really in high demand, and again in short supply. So these folks, it takes specialized training and hands-on practice in order to learn how to operate and maintain these systems. And so these are huge in demand. We have an enormous demand for what we call DCEO, data center engineering operation. huge opportunities there, and it overlaps a lot with what I was talking before in the build section as well. Last thing is power, right? So this is a huge business issue for us. It's a huge issue for society, right? Like, how do we get enough renewable energy to support this work? How do we do it in a way that's sustainable and environmentally, representing principles of stewardship? Amazon, Ray was talking about data centers as the largest consumer of power. Amazon is the largest consumer of renewable energy globally as well, right? And so we are actually on track to beat our sustainability goals by about 5 years, I believe. We have it's called the Climate Pledge, and where we are committed to, running entirely renewable energy. I think it's by 2040, and I think we're on track to get there by 2035. So, but like, again, we are not a power utility, so we rely on, we consume power from others, and so we are heavily invested in ensuring that there is a skilled workforce that can augment the grid, and then can also upgrade the grid, service the grid. So that involves, and again, we're going back to electricians. Like those are the folks that are in super high demand, wind turbine technicians, other kinds of engineers. But a lot of these projects to like install, energy generation, power generation installations, and then connect them into the grid, those are massive industrial construction projects. And then I go back to all the other jobs that we've been talking about. And by the way, they're all, if they're going to talk to each other, they need to be connected with fiber. And if you're going to dig a trench and bury a utility line, you might as well put the fiber there too. If you're going to run the fiber aerially, you might as well run the electricity aerially as well. And so there's a lot of overlapping opportunities here. And none of them that I've been talking about for a while, like not none of them, the overwhelming majority of them are within our network of vendors and contractors, not directly with AWS. So I've been talking at you for a while. I'm like absolutely happy to take questions. We can dive into any one of these to the extent that I can. But hopefully we can, hopefully this opened again. I want to go back to like opening the aperture and thinking about skilled technical jobs and the kinds of really, really terrific career opportunities that are available if we look beyond just the fingers behind the keyboard. And those are cool jobs too. Those are great career pathways too. So are there any questions?
I was curious.
Yeah.
You've talked about a lot of different aspects of like running the data center and like connecting those data centers and the infrastructure of the internet, like the physical infrastructure of the internet. I guess like, do you guys have like, is there like a role where you sort of mesh the two between like CS, like a CS computer keyboard job and one of those physical jobs? Because I'm sure someone has to plan out like the expansion needed for data centers, or where you put a
100%.
data center.
So there's like, a whole slew when we talk about network engineering, like, and also the developers of the hardware. So all of these jobs also have engineering stacked on top of them, right? And so if you, and let me go back to this one for right now, like data center engineering operations. I was just meeting this morning with a friend of mine who runs what's called a fleet remediation engineering team. And basically when something breaks, they're in charge of basically constantly iterating on the design of our data centers. And that includes both the way that they're wired, the way that they're laid out, the physical infrastructure, but also, just as you're saying, like the confluence of those things, right? So anything that you just described could be both like they all require that. Talking about security, are we talking about cybersecurity or physical security? Yes, we're talking about both of those things, right? And so going back to my conversation with my buddy Chris today, he runs this engineering team. He used to, and so they're a bunch of electrical engineers and mechanical engineers on their team. But the overwhelming majority of people on his team, he stole from operations. those are people who have been in the data centers managing the physical plant, managing this switchgear, managing these generators, managing these transformers, fixing them when they break, thinking about how to optimize what's wrong with them. He wanted their applied knowledge and experience on his team to do the engineering work. And so, like, the physical hands-on experience out in the field, I have found when I talk to a lot of my colleagues who work at AWS have moved into the design portion or the design function, have spoken about the tremendous value of that field experience, being out there on the ops team and basically like being there when stuff breaks and knowing how to fix it, right? That is there's no substitute for that when it comes to an engineering you know, that when it comes to doing the design work and the development work. So hopefully that helps. And like, yes, there's a million and one different roles. A lot of them, what is specifically to your question, Wallace, like network engineering is the thing that we really think about when it comes to like that intersection of the hardware, like the way the network is laid out, both inside the data center and then between the data centers. But then there's also hardware design, like when you're designing the components, that has to go hand in glove with the people who are designing the software that's going to run on those components, right? So, can I elaborate on the security side? YG. So
I think there's also the cyber.
yeah. I was saying like that.
Only part of the security.
So, the folks who manage the security of this data center, and you're right that it's not like captured in all these buckets, but I really do think it's about the operate side. There's both, right? The components of running software and using automation or sort of AI augmentation to surface threats and understand what are the threats to our network, right? And when I say our network, it's really the data does not belong to us, and that's why we take it so seriously, right? It's our customers' data that we guarantee, and that's AWS's commitment and our reputation, right? And so we think a lot about the technology needed to you know, to mitigate cyber threats, but then there's also a huge component of that has to be wedded to, complemented with physical security of our data centers, right? And so when you're thinking about, I'm just meeting yesterday with one of the guys who works as the security manager. He manages the physical security of data centers in like big chunks of the Western Hemisphere, like the Western United States and also all of Latin America. He started off as a security contractor. You guys, I'm talking about Omar, Sarah.
Yeah.
So Omar came to us. He worked at Subway before. He was like a manager at Subway, and then he became a security contractor at AWS, and he spent a year doing that, and then he came onto the security team, and now he's the manager of this entire organization that includes probably hundreds of people across multiple different US states and several Latin American countries.
And I would add that you know, I know we talk about cybersecurity a lot. The physical, I've actually been on a tour of a data center, which I think is fairly unusual, Mike.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's
on purpose. It's unusual.
Well, they, you know, they don't want people to know where they are.
Yeah.
They don't want them to know how to get in them. You know, so we did a data center tour, and the physical, there is so much technology involved in the physical security. I mean, yeah, there are security guards, you know, in uniforms and stuff, but that's a tiny part of the investment that's being made in the physical security of these data centers. I was just struck by how much technology there was in areas that, you know, you think it's okay, they got an alarm. right? They turn the alarm on when they go home at night or something, you know? Not like that. Not like that at all.
So that's what I was also trying to get at for YG. It was like for to your question, like in my conversation with Omar, he's always thinking about is like what are the protocols that he needs to be running? What is the right what is the right cadence of audits that we need to be running? Like how are we what is security as a system, right? Like there's multiple different systems feeding in all these inputs, and you can't pay attention to every single thing, right? So like how do you prioritize your thinking and then manage all these various different systems effectively, both with the physical humans, right, doing this work, but then also all this data running through, right? So when I want to go visit a data center, I'm going to go up to Oregon next week and I'm going to go visit data centers. I have to get a certain kind of permission, and I have to request access to specific parts of the data center. I have to have a reason in order to get into that data center, and then designing that entire system and the audits. And then if I don't use that badge in a couple of weeks, they revoke my access automatically, right? And so designing that system, just thinking about physical security, think about the programming and the sort of the UX design and the product development and the testing and the QA that goes into all of that, that has to work seamlessly with the physical reality on the ground, right? We were running one of these tours in a data center in Ohio, and they had some technical glitch with the keypads and the swipe cards. And so it was like diagnosing that problem, which they did, and then they had to send a technician in to go manually reprogram every single keypad overnight so that we could bring our people into the data center for that tour. So anyways, there's a lot of different, it's stuff that you never have thought of, right? And that's the piece that I think has been illuminating for all of us that didn't have this kind of experience before.
So I am a high school graduate, and I have taken a little bit of community college, and I'm interested. I've seen this presentation and I'm interested in getting involved. Or pursuing this. What are my next steps? What does that look like? Like, what's my roadmap?
I wish there was a single threaded answer for you. One of the things that I think about is I don't want to make a blanket recommendation for everyone, but one of the things that I have seen is the value of understanding physical building systems, physical, in the built environment, electrical systems, mechanical systems, HVAC systems, fiber and broadband network. And I would just encourage people when they think about pursuing jobs to also really ask themselves, is there sort of a physical hands-on component to this work that I might be able to explore? Right.
And look who popped in.
And I was like, okay. And then I was like, all right, tell that person to also talk to Carl Semino, if you can, maybe you can make him magically appear. I really think that one of the things that I would advise that high school student is to really explore the skilled trades, right? As one of these career opportunities. And so cue Carl to talk about.
I know. Carl, I'm going to ask you the question.
You're just getting blindsided, Carl.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, Carl.
Okay.
So you're just out of high school. You've watched this presentation. You're interested in pursuing it. What might those next steps be?
Well, you would contact an apprenticeship program in your area, find out when what their process is for bringing in new apprentices. Typically, the more skilled the trade, the more difficult and the more timely it is to get into it. Typically, they'll have a examination, some kind of a test. It's predominantly a math test. because there's a lot of math that you're using in the trades. Some of them, a lot of them have a follow-up interview, and then you go on to a waiting list. And as the employers hire off of the list, you move up, and then eventually when you're hired, you're accepted into the apprenticeship program. It begins your apprenticeship. You go to school 2 nights a week for 3 hours a night. Typically, sometimes you go to day school. It depends on the apprenticeship program. They're usually 5-year programs, and the programs are free. You earn while you learn, so you're getting paid while you do the work. Not necessarily when you're taking the school, but you earn a good wage. You start out making 40% of a journeyman's wage, so usually that's around 20 or 30. Well, it's around $30 or $35 an hour or more. And you
While
get
you're in
benefits
school, while you're in school.
while you're doing the work while you're in school. Yes, because it's a combination of on-the-job training and related and supplemental instruction. And so you move through. You get pay raises every 6 months as you complete your schooling and your work hours, and then you turn out and you're getting journeyman pay.
I should Carl, quick introduction. You missed the introductions at the beginning.
Sorry.
Fast one.
I'm Carl Cimino. I was a former training director for the Pipe Trades Training Center for the last 21 years. Just been retired for about 1.5 years now.
And you could not have picked a better time to pop on, Carl.
It's just like
Absolute perfection.
as if we had a
Like
plan,
summon
which we
him.
did not.
Funny.
Do we have any other questions from the group?
Let's make sure folks know how to find us. I don't know, Sarah, you have machinery to do that, or what do you want?
Yeah, well, people can drop their emails in the chat, and then otherwise just, the Bay ICT is always a great way.
And so could I ask City College San Francisco instructor, I know told a few of you to come to this. Was there anyone on the call that came through some different channel? So I will say this is recorded, and one of the reasons we do that is because we have a fair number of instructors in the Bay Area who will take this and play it for a class and then have a discussion about it, or maybe take part of it and play it for a class as a discussion. So I want to thank the participants a lot, because it's a lot better than just seeing a video of some guy talking. If there's some kind of interaction, and it's why we try and make them more human and a little bit less, I guess I'd say, polished, because we're all real people. So, oh, from Foothill. Okay, Alex. Great. Welcome.
And I'll say thank you guys for putting this stuff on. It's not often that you get to talk to people with real world experience, because when you're in school and in education, you don't really talk to people that have experience in the job field. My professor very luckily had a job downtown on the keyboard side of things, so he has every now and then he'll insert this is what you do in industry, is how you collaborate when you work with other people on a huge project when it comes to coding. So always good to hear from people that have more experience than me.
Oh, Ray, you're muted.
We're actually pretty easy to find if you want to follow up.